There are moments that split a life in two. For Marcus Reed, it took 6 seconds on a Tuesday morning in September. Route 412 cuts through eastern Pennsylvania like a scar through farmland, 2 lanes of cracked asphalt flanked by oak trees that had stood since before the Civil War. At 7:16 a.m., the road was empty except for a silver Bentley doing 75 and a 55, and Marcus's Ford F-150, a 1998 relic, held together by rust and stubbornness, trailing a quarter-mile behind. Marcus was reaching for the coffee in the cup holder when the Bentley's brake lights flared. The vehicle fishtailed once, twice, then launched itself into the ancient oak on the shoulder with a sound like the world breaking open. Metal shrieked, glass exploded into 10,000 glittering pieces. The impact was so violent the trees shuddered, dropping a cascade of leaves that drifted down through the sudden silence like ash. Marcus's boot hit the brake. The F-150 skidded 40 feet before stopping diagonal across both lanes. In the passenger seat, Eli's crayon rolled off his lap and disappeared under the seat. The boy's eyes went wide, fixed on the wreckage ahead, where smoke was already rising from the Bentley's crushed hood. Marcus's hand found his son's shoulder. His voice came out, flat command, without room for argument. "Eli, unbuckle. When I tell you run to the Callahan farm. Don't look back." The boy's voice shook. "Dad, do what I say." Marcus was already out, boots hitting gravel. The September morning bit cold into his lungs, carrying the acrid stench of gasoline and burnt rubber. The Bentley's front end had accordioned against the oak, the hood folded back on itself like paper. Through the spider-webbed windshield, he could see her slumped over the steering wheel, platinum hair dark with blood. The driver's door was jammed. Marcus yanked the handle twice, 3 times. Nothing. He circled to the passenger side. That door was crumpled, but not locked. He braced his shoulder against the frame and shoved. Something in the mechanism snapped and the door shrieked open. The interior reeked of gasoline and copper. Glass covered everything. Marcus crawled in, ignoring the slice of pain as a shard opened his forearm. The woman wasn't moving. He hooked one arm under her back, the other under her knees. Her head lolled against his shoulder, breath shallow but there. He pulled her out and ran. 20 yards from the vehicle, he laid her on the frost-stiff grass. Her pulse fluttered under his fingers, thin as paper. He ripped off his flannel overshirt, balled it against the damaged at her temple. Blood soaked through, warm against his calloused hands. Behind him, a small orange flame licked out from under the Bentley's hood. Marcus looked back at the F-150. Eli stood frozen beside the truck, one hand pressed against the window, face white. For half a heartbeat, their eyes met. Then Marcus turned away. The woman's eyelids flickered. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Marcus kept pressure on the wound, his other hand checking for broken bones, internal bleeding, anything else that might kill her before help arrived. "Stay with me. You're going to be fine. Just stay." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The Bentley's flames spread, climbing higher. 15 seconds later, the gas tank ignited. The explosion was a fist of heat and light that knocked Marcus forward over the woman's body. When he looked up, the vehicle was a fireball, black smoke pouring into the morning sky. Paramedics swarmed. Marcus stepped back, let them work. One looked up from checking vitals. "You pull her out." Marcus nodded. The paramedic's gaze flicked to Marcus's bleeding forearm, then back to the woman. "You saved her life." Marcus didn't answer. He was already walking back to his truck, where Eli waited with tears streaking his face. The boy threw himself forward and Marcus caught him, held him tight against his chest. "It's okay, I've got you." "Dad, you could have, but I didn't. We're fine." The ambulance doors slammed. The siren wailed back to life. Marcus watched the vehicle disappear down Route 412, taking the woman with it. He'd never asked her name. Hadn't thought to. In the chaos and the fear, such details seemed irrelevant. Only later, after he dropped Eli at school and returned to the garage, would he realize something was missing. The 10mm wrench that lived in his jacket pocket, the one with SR carved into the handle, Sarah's initials, her last gift before the cancer took her voice, gone. It must have fallen out when he'd laid the woman down. Must be with the paramedics now, or lost in the grass. Marcus stood in the empty garage bay, radio playing low, and felt the loss like a fist under his ribs. 3 years since Sarah died, and he'd carried that wrench every day. Now it was gone, taken by a stranger he'd never see again. He turned back to the engine in front of him, a Ford F-250 with a snapped timing belt, and tried to convince himself it didn't matter. Across Pennsylvania, in a VIP room on the 8th floor of Philadelphia General Hospital, Victoria Ashford woke to white walls and the steady beep of monitors. Her head felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. When she tried to sit up, pain lanced through her ribs and she fell back against the pillows with a gasp. The door opened. Garrett Mitchell crossed the room in 3 strides, expensive shoes, silent on the tile. His face was carefully neutral, the expression he wore during hostile board meetings. "You're awake. The doctor said you'd be out another few hours." Victoria's voice came out rough. "How long?" 18 hours. You've been unconscious since the accident. The deal is in jeopardy. Siemens wants to know if our CEO is going to live. The board wants an emergency meeting. Stock dropped 3% on the news. Victoria closed her eyes. Even that small motion sent pain through her skull. "Schedule the board meeting for Thursday. I'll be there." Garrett's voice went flat. "The doctor said you have a concussion. Broken ribs. You should be here at least a week." "I don't care what the doctor said." Thursday. A nurse entered, checked the eye, made notes on a tablet. When she left, Victoria opened her eyes again. Garrett was still there, arms crossed, wearing his "I'm not arguing, but you're wrong" expression. "The man who pulled you out. He left before the paramedics could get his information." Something shifted in Victoria's chest. She had expected Garrett to argue about the meeting, not bring up the accident. Her voice came out softer than she intended. "What do you mean left?" "Exactly that. He got you out, stayed until help arrived, then disappeared. No one knows his name." Victoria stared at the ceiling tiles. In her fractured memory of the crash, there was a moment, strong arms lifting her, a voice rough with fear telling her to hold on, the smell of motor oil and honest sweat. Then nothing. "Find him." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I want to thank him. A check would be faster." Victoria's gaze snapped to him, and whatever he saw in her face made him step back. "No check. Find him. I want to know who he is." After Garrett left, a different nurse came in with Victoria's belongings. Everything was sealed in clear plastic bags. Her Patek Philippe crystal, shattered, stopped at 716. Her phone screen cracked into a spiderweb. Her wallet bloodstained. And something that didn't belong to her. A wrench. Small, oil-darkened, well-used. Carved into the metal handle were 2 letters SR. Victoria held it up to the light. The letters had been cut deep, done with care and patience. This wasn't just a tool. This was a keepsake. Something precious. Her fingers traced the initials. SR. His name, or someone else's, someone he loved. She pressed the call button. When Garrett returned, she held up the wrench. "Find him and find out who SR Garrett is." Reed's Auto Repair occupied a weathered building on the edge of Millfield, population 4,800 and shrinking. The structure leaned slightly, a slow concession to decades of Pennsylvania winters. The sign out front flickered, the R, burnt out for 6 months now, because Marcus didn't have the $200 to fix it and couldn't justify spending money on cosmetics when the building needed a new roof. Inside the garage smelled like every mechanic shop in America: motor oil, brake fluid, the metallic tang of welding coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. 2 bays, both occupied. A radio on the workbench played country music low enough to think to loud enough to fill the silence. Marcus was elbow deep in Roy Callahan's F-250 when the farmer walked in, boots tracking mud across the concrete floor. Callahan was 60, weathered brown from 4 decades of farming, with the permanent squint of a man who'd spent too many years staring at horizons. Marcus straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that only spread the grease around. Timing belt snapped. "You're lucky you were going slow when it happened." Callahan's face creased into worry lines. "How bad?" "Could be worse. This is an interference engine. If you'd been doing highway speed, the pistons would have hit the valves on the way up. That's 4,000 in damage minimum. As it is, we're looking at new timing belt water pump. Might as well replace it while we're in there, and the serpentine belt's showing wear." "Cost?" Marcus pulled a calculator from his pocket, did the math twice to make sure. $380, parts and labor." Callahan's shoulders loosened. "Place in Reading quoted me 600, and they were overcharging, or they saw you coming and decided to pad the bill." The farmer nodded slowly, the gesture of a man who'd been taken advantage of before and learned to appreciate honesty when he found it. "You're a good man, Marcus. Your grandfather would be proud." Marcus turned back to the engine. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when the bank wanted $8,000 in 60 days, or they'd foreclose on the building his grandfather had bought in 1952. In the corner of the garage, Eli sat cross-legged on a rolling stool sketchbook balanced on his knees. The boy was small for 8 elbows and knees with red-brown hair that refused to lie flat in his mother's dark eyes. He drew with the focused intensity of someone escaping into a better world, his pencil scratching across paper in quick, confident strokes. Callahan walked over, looked down at the sketch. "That's the accident from this morning, isn't it?" Eli nodded without looking up. The drawing showed a man pulling a woman from flames, the figures rough but recognizable, the composition instinctively balanced. "You've got talent, son. Gets that from your mother." Marcus's voice came from under the hood. "Yeah, Sarah was the artist in the family." The words landed heavy in the garage. Callahan knew better than to push. Everyone in Millfield knew about Sarah Reed, about the cancer that had eaten her from the inside, while Marcus worked 3 jobs to pay for treatments that only bought time, never hope. Marcus worked in silence for another 20 minutes, then dropped the hood and turned to wash his hands in the industrial sink. The water ran black with oil and grease. No matter how hard he scrubbed his hands, never came completely clean. The stains had worked their way into the creases of his palms, the beds of his fingernails permanent as scars. Callahan paid in cash, mostly 20s, the bills soft from being folded and refolded in a wallet. After he left, Marcus counted the money twice and put it in the register. $380. Barely a dent in what he owed. He looked at Eli, who had moved on to a new drawing. This one showed the garage afternoon light slanting through the open bay door, Marcus's silhouette bent over an engine. The boy had captured something essential about the scene, the way shadows and light transformed ordinary work into something almost sacred. "You hungry?" Eli shook his head without looking up. "Mrs. Kowalski brought mac and cheese this morning. I had some for lunch." Marcus felt a familiar twist of gratitude and guilt. The widow next door had appointed herself their guardian angel, showing up twice a week with casseroles and concern. She never said it was charity, but they both knew. A man who worked 60-hour weeks couldn't always remember to feed his kid properly. "You got homework." "Did it at school." "Then help me close up." They worked together with the wordless efficiency of long practice. Eli put away tools while Marcus swept the floor, locked the parts cabinet, shut down the air compressor. By 6 o'clock, the garage was dark, and they were climbing into the F-150 for the short drive home. The house was small, a 2-bedroom on Maple Street that Marcus's grandfather had built in 1955. The paint was peeling, the porch steps sagged, the roof leaked when it rained hard. But it was paid off, and in a world where everything cost money, Marcus didn't have that mattered. Inside, Eli went straight to the kitchen table with his homework, while Marcus pulled leftovers from the fridge. Mrs. Kowalski's mac and cheese still warm in the Tupperware. He divided it onto 2 plates, added some frozen vegetables because Sarah would have wanted Eli to eat something green, and carried both plates to the table. They ate in comfortable silence. When Eli finished, he took his plate to the sink without being asked, rinsed it, and went to his room. Marcus heard the door close, heard the bed springs creak. The boy would be drawing again, lost in worlds that didn't hurt as much as this one. Marcus washed the dishes by hand, dried them, put them away. The kitchen was small enough that he could reach everything without moving his feet. On the windowsill above the sink sat a photograph Sarah, Marcus, and Eli 3 years ago before the diagnosis. In the picture, Sarah was laughing, head thrown back, red hair catching the light. Eli was 4, gap-toothed and grinning. Marcus had his arms around both of them, face relaxed in a way it never was anymore. He touched the frame with wet fingers, leaving marks on the glass. "I saved her today, Sarah. The woman in the accident. I got there in time." The photograph didn't answer. The kitchen stayed silent, except for the drip of the faucet he kept meaning to fix. "Not like with you. This time I was fast enough." His throat closed. He turned away from the photograph, dried his hands on the dish towel, and walked to the garage to check his jacket pocket for the wrench. Still gone. 300 miles away, in an office tower that caught the sunset and turned it into gold, Victoria Ashford sat behind a desk that cost more than Marcus Reed made in 6 months and studied a manila folder. Watson had delivered it personally that morning, 2 weeks after the accident. The private investigator was in his 50s, gray-haired and forgettable. The kind of man who could follow someone for hours without being noticed. He'd worked for Ashford Acquisitions before running background checks on merger targets, digging up dirt on hostile board members. This job was different. Victoria opened the folder. The first page was a DMV photo: Marcus Reed, 34, brown hair, hazel eyes, 6'1", 190 pounds. The camera had caught him mid-blink, making him look tired or sad or both. The next pages were surveillance photos. Marcus under the hood of a Chevy Silverado, forearms corded with muscle-white t-shirt stained with oil. Marcus walking out of a diner carrying takeout, shoulders hunched against the cold. Marcus with his son outside of school. One hand on the boy's shoulder, both of them squinting into morning sun. Watson had been thorough. 3 years widowed. One dependent. Owner and sole employee of Reed's Auto Repair. Total debt $8,300 to First National Bank of Millfield, secured against the property. 2 months overdue. No criminal record. No lawsuits. No bankruptcies. The last page was a photocopy of Sarah Reed's death certificate. Cancer. Age 31. Victoria read it twice, then closed the folder and looked across her desk at Garrett Mitchell. Her COO sat in one of the leather chairs that cost $3,000 each, tablet on his lap, waiting. You want to send him a check. $10,000. That's what you're thinking. Garrett's expression didn't change. It's what anyone would expect. You send a generous thank you, he cashes it, everyone moves on. And what does that tell me about him? That he needs money. According to Watson, his garage is about to be foreclosed. Victoria tapped the folder with one manicured nail. Or it tells me whether he's the kind of man who'll take a check from a stranger just because she's rich. You think he'll turn down $10,000? I think if he takes it, I'll never know if he's good or just smart enough to take what's offered. And if he turns it down, she paused, considering. If he turns it down, I'll know something else. Garrett closed his tablet with a soft click. You're going to do something stupid. Victoria smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. I'm going to find out who Marcus Reed really is. And the only way to do that is to meet him when he doesn't know I have 2 billion reasons for him to lie. 2 days later, Victoria stood in her penthouse and studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror was unrecognizable. Levi's jeans from Goodwill, $8, still creased from the shelf. Old Navy sweater, $6, pilling at the elbows. White sneakers that were supposed to be Nikes, but weren't, bought from a guy selling them out of a trunk for $15 cash. Her hair was down, unstyled. Her face was clean of the Chanel foundation she'd worn since college. Her nails were bare, the acrylic extensions removed, leaving her real nails short and uneven. She looked ordinary, like someone who shopped at Walmart and worried about electric bills. Like someone Marcus Reed might actually trust. The disguise had taken a week to build. She'd rented a studio apartment in Reading, 40 minutes from Millfield, using a shell company Garrett set up. Furnished it from thrift stores and Craigslist. Bought a used Honda Civic with cash. Created a backstory: Tory Blake, 29, freelance graphic designer, moved from Philadelphia to get away from the noise. She'd practiced the story in front of the mirror until it sounded natural. Practiced making coffee in the tiny kitchen, cooking eggs on the 2-burner stove, doing laundry in the basement machines. All the small tasks she'd never done because there had always been someone to do them for her. Garrett had fought her the whole way. This is insane. If the board finds out, they won't. If the press discovers Victoria Ashford is playing dress-up in rural Pennsylvania, they won't. You're risking everything for what? To see if some mechanic is a nice guy. Victoria had turned on him, and the force of her gaze made him step back. I'm risking everything to know what it feels like when someone looks at me and doesn't see a dollar sign. Can you understand that? Garrett had gone quiet. After a long moment, he'd nodded. 2 days a week in Reading, 3 days here running the company. If you miss a board meeting, if you miss a signature on a deal, I'm pulling the plug. Agreed. Now standing in jeans that felt wrong and shoes that pinched, Victoria picked up the keys to the Honda Civic and headed for the door. She was about to commit to the biggest lie of her life, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that the lie might be the most honest thing she'd ever done. Reed's Auto Repair on a Wednesday afternoon in September. Radio playing Brooks and Dunn, the smell of motor oil thick enough to taste Marcus Reed, half buried under a Ford Taurus with a blown head gasket. The Honda Civic rolled up at 3:47 p.m. Marcus heard it before he saw it, the particular rattle of a car that needed attention, but wasn't dying yet. He rolled out from under the Taurus, stood, wiped his hands on a rag that redistributed the grease more than removed it. The woman who stepped out of the Civic was trying hard to look like she belonged there. Jeans, sweater, sneakers that were either very cheap or very good fakes. But she moved wrong, like someone uncomfortable in her own skin. And when she pushed her hair back from her face, her watch caught the light. Cartier, at least $5,000. Marcus filed that away and walked over. Afternoon, something I can help you with. Her voice was careful, each word chosen. My car's making a noise. Can you take a look? What kind of noise? Like a squeal when I start it. Marcus nodded toward the Civic. Let's hear it. She got in, turned the key. The engine caught, and immediately a high-pitched squeal cut through the garage. Marcus listened for 3 seconds, then gestured for her to shut it off. Serpentine belt. The tensioner's weak, putting uneven pressure on the belt. It'll get worse until the belt snaps, and then you'll lose power steering alternator water pump. $35 to fix 20 minutes. She blinked. That's all? That's all. The place in Reading said it would be $200. Marcus shrugged. They saw you coming, or they're just greedy. Either way, I don't charge for things you don't need. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face from careful to warm. You're not like other mechanics. I'm exactly like other mechanics. I just got taught that reputation matters more than an extra $100. He turned toward the parts cabinet, missing the way she watched him walk, the way her expression shifted from performance to something softer, more real. When he came back with the belt and tensioner, she was still standing by her car, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though the afternoon was warm. You can wait in the office if you want. There's coffee. I'm fine here. Marcus got to work. The job was simple, mechanical, the kind of thing he could do in his sleep. Remove the old belt, check the pulleys for wear, install the new tensioner, thread the new belt through the serpentine pattern. His hands moved with the confidence of 15 years of practice muscle memory taking over while his mind wandered. She was lying about something. He could feel it in the way she held herself, the disconnect between her clothes and her posture. Rich girl playing poor. But why he finished the job, started the engine, listened. The squeal was gone. He shut it down and walked around to where she stood. You're good to go. She pulled out a wallet, leather, expensive, not matching the rest of her outfit, and counted out $35 in crisp 20s. The bills looked like they'd come straight from an ATM, not from someone who checked prices before buying groceries. Keep the change. No change, it was $35. She hesitated, then took the 5 back. When their fingers touched, she jerked her hand away, like she'd been shocked. Marcus pretended not to notice. That's when Eli emerged from the back room, sketchbook under one arm, pencil behind his ear. The boy stopped when he saw the stranger, suddenly shy. Dad? Who's that? Customer, go finish your homework. But the woman had already knelt down to Eli's level, moving with a grace that definitely didn't match the Goodwill clothes. What are you drawing? Eli's shyness warred with his pride. Pride won. He opened the sketchbook to show a drawing of the garage, late afternoon light, slanting through the bay door. Marcus's figure bent over, an engine, shadows pooling beneath. The woman went very still. You did this, Eli nodded. Do you know what chiaroscuro is? The boy shook his head. It's the way you use light and dark together. See here how the light catches your dad's hands, but the shadows wrap around everything else. That's not something people usually figure out on their own. You have real talent. Eli's face lit up like someone had turned on a lamp inside him. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. When was the last time someone had looked at his son like that? Like Eli mattered, like the things he created were worth something. The woman was still focused on Eli. You see how the shadow here is darker? Try adding some cross-hatching, small strokes at an angle. It'll give it depth, make it look like the shadow is wrapping around the metal instead of just sitting on top. She pantomimed the motion. Eli copied her, his pencil moving across the page. After a dozen strokes, he stopped and stared. It looks more real. Because you're teaching your eye to see the way things actually are, not the way we think they are. Marcus found his voice. You know, Art. She stood, and for just a second, something flickered across her face, calculation or fear or regret. I studied graphic design. Nothing professional, just I like helping people see things. Another lie, but a small one and told for a reason he didn't understand yet. Marcus let it pass. Eli was still staring at his drawing, then up at the woman with something like worship. Will you come back? She looked at Marcus, asking permission without asking. Garage is open Monday through Friday, 7 to 6. After she drove away, Eli went back to his drawing with renewed focus, his pencil flying across the page. Marcus watched his son work and wondered what he'd just let into their lives. The woman came back 3 days later, then a week after that, then twice in 1 week. Each time she had a different excuse: oil change, tire pressure, check a noise that turned out to be nothing. And each time she stayed a little longer, teaching Eli techniques that transformed his rough sketches into something approaching real art. The third visit, she brought pizza. Marcus tried to refuse. You don't need to. I wanted to. Besides, I'm hungry and pizza's better when you share it. They ate sitting on folding chairs in the garage, paper plates balanced on knees, radio playing low. Eli asked questions between bites. Did she have family? Where did she live? What was her favorite color? She answered carefully. Her mother had died 5 years ago. Cancer. She lived in Reading now. Blue maybe? Or green? Marcus heard the careful omission. No mention of a father, no mention of friends, just herself and a dead mother in a rented apartment in a town where she didn't know anyone. When Eli asked if she was lonely, she went very quiet. Sometimes, but it's peaceful too, being alone. Marcus understood that. After Sarah died, he discovered that loneliness and peace could occupy the same space, that sometimes the absence of other people was easier than their presence, their pity, their well-meaning attempts to fix things that couldn't be fixed. My mom died too, 3 years ago. Tori, she'd introduced herself as Tori Blake, looked at Marcus, and in her eyes he saw recognition. Not sympathy, recognition. She knew this particular flavor of loss. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. They finished eating in silence that felt less empty than it should have. After Tori left, Roy Callahan stopped by to pick up his truck. The farmer looked at Marcus with knowing eyes. New girlfriend, customer. Customer who brings pizza and teaches your boy to draw. Marcus turned back to the engine he was working on. Just a customer. Callahan chuckled. Whatever you say, Marcus. But let me tell you something. My daddy told me a man's worth is measured by what he leaves his children, not what he takes for himself. Your boy's smiling more these days. That is worth paying attention to. After Callahan left, Marcus stood in the empty garage and thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made to her in the hospital 2 days before she died. Take care of Eli. Make sure he knows he's loved. Don't let him grow up thinking sadness is all there is. He'd tried. God knew he'd tried. But it was hard to teach joy when you'd forgotten what it felt like. Maybe that's what Tori was: not a romantic interest, not a replacement for Sarah, but a reminder that the world still held lightness, that Eli deserved more than a father who worked himself numb to avoid feeling anything at all. That night, after Eli had gone to bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a beer he wouldn't finish, and Sarah's photograph in front of him. I don't know what I'm doing. She's lying about something, I can tell, but Eli likes her, and He stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence even to a photograph. I like her too. 3 weeks after Tori Blake first appeared, Marcus found himself looking forward to her visits. Not because of the work, most of it was make work things that didn't really need fixing, but because of the way she looked at Eli, like his drawings mattered, like his thoughts were worth hearing. And because of the way she moved through the garage, unafraid of grease or dirt rolling up her sleeves and helping without being asked. She was still lying. He'd caught other tells, the way she held a wrench like someone who'd read about tools but never used them. The way she flinched at loud noises, as if unaccustomed to the industrial cacophony of a working garage. The way she sometimes forgot to maintain her careful accent and slipped into something more refined, more educated. But he didn't call her on it. Everyone had secrets. Everyone had reasons for not being entirely honest about who they were or where they'd come from. As long as she wasn't hurting anyone, Marcus figured her secrets were her own business. Then on a Thursday evening in early October, Eli couldn't sleep. Marcus heard the footsteps, first the soft pad of small feet on hardwood. Then a knock on his bedroom door. Dad, you awake? Marcus was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, doing the math on how to pay the bank another month. He sat up. Come in, kiddo. Eli appeared in the doorway silhouetted by the hallway light. He crossed to the bed and climbed up without asking, settling beside Marcus, with the easy trust of a child who'd never been told no to this particular comfort. Can I ask you something? Always. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, is Tori like Mom? The question hit like a fist. Marcus's throat closed. He forced himself to breathe, to think, to find words that were honest but wouldn't hurt. Why do you ask? Because she teaches me stuff, like Mom did. And she looks at me like she sees me. You know, Marcus did know. Sarah had always seen Eli that way, like he was the most important person in any room, like his opinions and ideas mattered as much as any adults. Tori's not like your mom. Nobody could be. Your mom was special. But she makes you smile. I see it. You don't smile that much anymore, Dad. The observation cut deeper than it should have. Marcus pulled Eli closer, arm around his son's narrow shoulders. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Eli's voice came out soft, almost a whisper. Mom used to teach me about light, how to draw it, how to see it. And now Tori's teaching me the same thing. Maybe that's Mom's way of saying it's okay, that you can love someone again. Marcus couldn't speak. His chest was too tight, his throat too thick. He held his son and felt tears track down his face in the darkness. Eli didn't seem to notice or didn't care. It's okay to be sad, Dad, but it's okay to be happy too. Out of the mouths of children. Marcus managed to find his voice. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice. They sat together in the dark, father and son, sharing a grief that was slowly, painfully beginning to transform into something else. After Eli fell asleep, Marcus carried him back to his own bed, tucked him in, stood in the doorway watching him breathe. Then he went to the kitchen, looked at Sarah's photograph. He's right, isn't he? You'd want me to be happy. You'd want him to have more than just me and my sadness. The photograph stayed silent, but Marcus felt for the first time in 3 years like maybe Sarah was listening. Like maybe she'd give her blessing if he could just figure out how to ask. Thursday afternoon, Marcus was installing new brake pads on a Dodge Ram when he heard the Rolls-Royce. You didn't hear cars like that in Millfield. The engine was too quiet, the tires too expensive. The whole machine designed to separate its occupants from the common experience of driving. It rolled into the garage bay like a shark entering a swimming pool. The driver stayed in the car. The rear door opened and a woman emerged who made Tori Blake's disguise look like amateur hour. This woman wore her wealth-like armor, Chanel suit in charcoal gray pearls, the size of marble shoes that cost more than Marcus's mortgage payment. She was 70 if she was a day, but she moved with the rigid posture of someone who'd never bowed to anything in her life. Behind her, 2 men in dark suits took up positions by the car. Security, the kind that knew how to hurt people and not leave marks. Marcus straightened, wiped his hands on a rag. The woman's gaze swept the garage like she was cataloging everything for later disposal. Marcus Reed, that's me. You need work done on your car. Her laugh was sharp and cold. I need you to stay away from my granddaughter. The world tilted slightly. Marcus's hands went still. I don't know what you're talking about. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. She held it up. It showed Tori Blake entering Reed's Auto Repair, except the caption underneath read, Victoria Ashford, CEO, Ashford Acquisitions. Her name isn't Tori Blake, it's Victoria Ashford. She runs a $2.3 billion company. And for some incomprehensible reason, she's been playing dress-up in your little garage for the past month. Marcus took the photograph, studied it. It was definitely Tori's same face, same hair. But the woman in the photo wore a suit that probably cost $5,000. Her hair was styled. Her expression was cold, calculating nothing like the warm uncertainty of Tori Blake. I don't understand. The older woman pulled out a checkbook. You don't need to understand. You just need to take this and disappear. She wrote quickly, tore off the check, laid it on Marcus's workbench. $50,000. That's more than you make in 2 years. More than enough to pay off your debts and set yourself up somewhere else. Take it, cash it, and never contact my granddaughter again. Marcus looked at the check, at the number, at what it represented. His garage saved. The bank paid off. Breathing room. Security for Eli. Then he looked at the woman's face and saw what she expected. that he would take it, that he was for sale, that everyone had a price and $50,000 was more than enough for a struggling mechanic with an 8-year-old son and a foreclosure notice taped to his door. He picked up the check. The woman's face showed satisfaction. Marcus tore it in half, then in half again, then again until it was confetti in his oil-stained hands. He let the pieces fall. "Get out of my garage." The woman's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Respect maybe, or calculation. "She's destroying her company for you. A deal worth $800 million is falling apart because she won't focus. The board wants to remove her. Investors are pulling out, all because she's obsessed with playing poor little match girl in your garage. I didn't ask for any of that. But you're getting it anyway. She's going to lose everything. And when she does, she'll blame you. Is that what you want?" Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He forced them open. "What I want is for you to leave, now." Eleanor Ashford, he didn't know her name yet, but he'd learn it, picked up her purse. The security guards moved toward the doors. At the threshold, she turned back. "You'll regret this, Mr. Reed. My granddaughter's world and yours don't intersect. They can't. And when you realize that when everything falls apart, remember you could have walked away with $50,000 and your pride intact." The Rolls-Royce purred away. Marcus stood in the sudden silence, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and burnt rubber, and felt the ground shift beneath him. He pulled out his phone, not the smartphone he couldn't afford, but the battered Samsung with the cracked screen that barely held a charge, and opened the browser. Typed in Victoria Ashford. The results loaded slowly. Hundreds of them. Forbes' youngest female CEO in private equity. Wall Street Journal, Ashford's billion-dollar gamble. Business Insider, the woman behind the empire. Photos. Victoria Ashford at charity galas, at business conferences, at board meetings. Always in designer clothes, always with that cold, calculating expression. Not a trace of Tory Blake's uncertain warmth. He clicked on a video. Victoria Ashford speaking at a conference, her voice clipped and precise, nothing like Tory's careful softness. Talking about acquisitions and market disruption and shareholder value. Marcus closed the browser, set down his phone, looked around his garage, his grandfather's garage built with sweat and hope, and the belief that honest work deserved honest pay. Everything Tory Blake had told him was a lie. Everything. He walked to his workbench, picked up one of the confetti pieces of check. $50,000 torn into pieces. Eleanor Ashford had been wrong about one thing. Marcus Reed's pride had been gone, for a long time worn away by grief and poverty, and the slow grind of trying to be enough for a son who deserved better. But his dignity remained, and he wouldn't sell that, not for $50,000, not for anything. Tomorrow when she came back, if she came back, he'd have to face it. The woman he'd started to care about might not exist at all. Just a rich girl's fantasy, a role played until real life called her back. Marcus locked up the garage alone that night, the weight of tomorrow pressing down on him like the Pennsylvania sky before a storm. The next morning arrived with the inevitability of all reckoning days. Marcus opened Reed's Auto Repair at 7 an hour earlier than usual because waiting at home felt like drowning. He stood in the center of the garage bay, arms loose at his sides, weight balanced. A man bracing for impact. The Honda Civic appeared at 8:47 a.m. Through the open bay door, Marcus watched it turn into the gravel lot engine, knocking the way it had since the first day. Victoria, he'd stopped thinking of her as Tory the moment Eleanor left, killed the engine, and sat motionless behind the wheel for 17 seconds. He counted. When she finally emerged, she looked like she'd aged years overnight. Her face was bare eyes, red-rimmed, hair pulled back in a careless knot. The Goodwill jeans and sweater hung on her like borrowed clothes, which he supposed they were. Everything about her had been borrowed. None of it real. She walked toward him, each footfall on gravel, loud in the October quiet. Her hands twisted together, then apart, then together again. He'd never seen her nervous before. It was almost satisfying. "Good morning, Marcus." His voice came out flat, dead. "Good morning, Victoria." The name landed between them like a grenade. She flinched but didn't look away. "You know, your grandmother came yesterday. Told me everything. Showed me pictures. I did my own research after she left." "Marcus, don't." He held up a hand. "Don't try to explain. Don't try to justify. Just tell me one thing. He stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into her face, the desperation in her eyes. Was any of it real? The question broke something in her chest. She wanted to lie, wanted to give him an answer that would hurt less. But she'd lied enough. Yes, all of it. Everything I felt, everything I said to Eli, every moment in this garage that was real. The only lie was my name, and your job, and where you live, and who you are. No, the person I was here with you and Eli, that's who I am, or who I want to be. The CEO, the suits, the board meetings, that's the role I play. But here, her voice cracked, here I got to be just me. Marcus laughed bitter and sharp. You think it's that simple? You think you can put on jeans and come slumming in my garage and that makes you real? I never thought you did. You absolutely did. You thought you could play poor people for a few weeks, feel good about yourself, then go back to your penthouse and your billions. That's not fair. Fair. You want to talk about fair? His voice rose, control slipping. I've been working 70-hour weeks to keep food on the table and a roof over my son's head. I'm 2 months from losing everything my grandfather built, and you've been playing dress-up like this is some kind of reality show. Victoria's hands shook. She pressed them against her thighs. I know it was wrong, but I needed to know if someone could see me, the real me, without seeing the money first. Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. I saw you. I trusted you. And now I know that was all a lie. He turned away, then back, as if he couldn't decide whether to walk away or keep fighting. Eli trusted you. He drew you into every picture. He asked me if you were like his mother, and Marcus's voice broke. I was starting to believe that maybe we could, that maybe it was okay to. He couldn't finish. Victoria stepped forward, reaching for him. Marcus, please. Don't touch me. The words were ice. Victoria pulled back as if burned. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could go back. You can't. And even if you could, would you really choose this? He gestured at the garage, at himself, at everything his life represented. Over your empire. The question hung between them. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, because she didn't know the answer. She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe she'd choose this warmth and honesty over the cold perfection of her other life. But she didn't know if that was true. The silence stretched too long. Marcus's expression hardened. That's what I thought. Get out. Please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You're a billionaire playing at being poor. I'm a mechanic trying to survive. We don't belong in the same world, and pretending otherwise just hurts people. What about Eli? The low blow landed. Marcus's face went white. You don't get to use my son to manipulate me. You don't get to claim you care about him when you've been lying to him from the start. I do care about him. I love him. You don't even know him. You know a fantasy, a kid you could play artist with for a few hours a week. But you don't know what it's like to sit up all night when he has nightmares about his mom. You don't know what it's like to explain why we can't afford the school trip or the new shoes or the art supplies he needs. You don't know. Marcus stopped, took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was terrifyingly calm. Go back to your real life, Victoria. Play CEO. Make your billions and leave us alone. Behind Marcus' movement, Eli appeared in the office doorway, backpack slung over one narrow shoulder, sketchpad clutched against his chest. School didn't start for another hour. Marcus must have brought him early, unable to face the empty house. The boy's eyes went wide when he saw Victoria. His shout split the air. Tori! He launched himself forward. Marcus caught him mid-stride, one hand on Eli's shoulder. Eli, go inside. The boy twisted against his father's grip. But Tori's here. I want to show her my new drawing. Inside now. Something in Marcus's tone penetrated. Eli's enthusiasm drained away, replaced by confusion that rapidly shaded into hurt. His gaze bounced between the two adults, reading the tension in their postures, the careful distance Victoria maintained. What's wrong? Victoria knelt, bringing herself to Eli's eye level alone. The concrete bit into her knees through the denim. Eli, I need to tell you something. My name isn't really Tori, it's Victoria. The boy's forehead creased. Why'd you lie? The question asked with such simple directness cut deeper than any of Marcus's accusations. Victoria fought to keep her voice steady. Because I wanted you and your dad to like me for who I am, not for what I have. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd treat me differently. What truth? Marcus's voice came from above, rough with suppressed emotion. She's rich, Eli. Very rich. She runs a big company in New York. She came here pretending to be someone else. Eli processed this information with the slow deliberation of a child trying to reconcile contradictions. His next words emerged barely above a whisper. So you don't really like drawing. You don't really like teaching me. No, I mean, yes, I love teaching you. That part was real. All the art stuff, all the time we spent together. But you lied about your name and where you live, and Eli's voice climbed. And everything. Tears were building behind Victoria's eyes. She blinked them back. I lied about those things because I was scared. But my feelings for you were never fake. You're incredibly talented and kind, and I don't care. Eli wrenched away from both adults, his sketch pad falling to the concrete. Pages fluttered open, revealing drawing after drawing of the three of them, Victoria and Marcus and Eli, rendered in careful pencil strokes. Families, that's what every picture showed. Families. The boy's hands moved before anyone could stop him. He grabbed the edges of the pad and tore. The spine cracked. Pages ripped free, scattering across the garage floor like wounded birds. Victoria reached for him. Eli, please. You're just like everyone else. You pretended to care, but you didn't, not really. Because if you did, you wouldn't have lied. His voice broke on the last word. He was crying now, tears streaming down his face, and Victoria felt each one like a brand. Marcus moved to comfort his son, but Eli twisted away, running for the office, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence that followed was devastating. Victoria knelt among the scattered drawings, picking up torn pages with shaking hands. Here was the garage warm light in careful shadows. Here was Marcus bent over an engine rendered with love. Here was herself teaching Eli, captured in a moment of pure connection. Destroyed. Marcus's boots appeared in her peripheral vision. When he spoke, his voice carried exhaustion instead of anger. You should go. Victoria gathered the torn pages, holding them against her chest like they might shield her from what came next. Let me fix this. Let me explain to him. There's nothing to explain. He trusted you. You broke that trust. No amount of explanation makes it hurt less. She stood still, clutching the ruined drawings. I never meant to hurt him. But you did, and that's what matters. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. Victoria walked to her car on legs that felt disconnected from her body. She set the torn drawings on the passenger seat, started the engine, pulled away. In the rearview mirror, Marcus stood motionless in the garage entrance, a statue commemorating everything she'd lost. The drive back to Reading blurred. Victoria's hands found the steering wheel, found the turn signals, found the key in the ignition when she finally pulled into her apartment complex. Muscle memory carried her up 2 flights of stairs and through a door she didn't remember unlocking. Inside, the studio apartment looked exactly as she'd left it 3 days ago. Thrift store furniture, Goodwill clothes hanging in the closet, the life of Tori Blake preserved in amber. She lasted 5 minutes before the walls started closing in. Her phone buzzed. Garrett. Board meeting in 2 hours. Siemens is threatening to walk. You need to be here. Victoria looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Tori Blake stared back, messy hair. No makeup, borrowed identity. She touched her own face like a stranger's. I'll be there. The drive to Manhattan took 90 minutes, long enough to shed Tori Blake like snakeskin, long enough to reconstruct Victoria Ashford from memory and necessity, long enough to transform heartbreak into the cold fury that made her effective in boardrooms. By the time she reached Ashford Acquisitions headquarters, the metamorphosis was complete. Hair swept into a severe bun, suit armor pressed and perfect. Heels that added 3 inches and subtracted any remaining softness. She walked into the 40th floor conference room at exactly 4:00 p.m. 12 board members looked up from their tablets. Eleanor sat at the far end, expression unreadable. The Siemens representatives occupied the opposite side of the table, 3 men in identical navy suits with identical skeptical expressions. The lead negotiator, Heinrich Muller, according to his nameplate, opened a leather portfolio. Miss Ashford, good of you to join us. Victoria took her seat at the head of the table. Gentlemen, I understand there are concerns about our commitment to this partnership. Micheller's smile didn't reach his eyes. Concerns is generous. We've been attempting to finalize terms for 3 weeks. Your office has been difficult to reach. Translation, you've been ignoring us. Victoria felt the board member's attention sharpen, waiting to see how she'd handle the implicit criticism. She leaned forward. I apologize for the delay. Personal matters required my attention. But those are resolved now and I'm prepared to move forward. Personal matters. As if Eli's tears and Marcus's betrayal could be filed under routine business interruptions. Mueller flipped through documents. The terms we discussed in September are no longer viable. The market has shifted. We'd need to renegotiate the valuation, downward I assume, his smile widened fractionally, by approximately 12%. $96 million, that's what her absence had cost. Victoria felt the number like a physical weight. Across the table, Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but her fingers tapped once against her portfolio. Disappointment transmitted in Morse code. The negotiation lasted 4 hours. Victoria fought for every percentage point, leveraging market data and competitive pressure until Mueller's team looked exhausted. By 8 hours p.m., they'd clawed back 7 of the 12%, limiting the damage to $40 million instead of $100. Mueller stood extending his hand. We have an agreement in principle. My team will draft the revised terms for review Monday. After the Siemens team left, the board members filed out in silence. Eleanor lingered, waiting until they were alone. That could have been catastrophic. Victoria loosened her collar, suddenly unable to breathe in the perfectly climate-controlled air. But it wasn't, because you finally decided to do your job instead of playing house in Pennsylvania. The words were delivered with Eleanor's characteristic precision, sharp enough to cut, measured enough to seem like observation rather than attack. Victoria met her grandmother's gaze. You had no right to go to Marcus, to offer him money like he was for sale. I was protecting you from a mistake that would have destroyed everything we've built. We are you. Eleanor's expression flickered surprise, maybe, or recognition that Victoria had finally found the courage to challenge her directly. Your mother tried the same thing once. Fell for a man who worked with his hands, thought love could bridge the gap between her world and his. Eleanor's voice went distant. I broke them up. Told myself I was protecting her from making a terrible choice. She married your father instead, an appropriate background, appropriate connections, and spent 20 years resenting me for it. This was new territory. Eleanor never discussed Catherine's marriage, the mother Victoria had lost to ovarian cancer 5 years ago. Mom never said, because she forgave me, eventually, right before the cancer took her speech. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together. Her last coherent words were asking me not to make the same mistake with you. The confession hung in the air between them. Victoria felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the woman who'd raised her after Catherine died. Then why interfere now? Because watching you destroy yourself over someone who can't possibly understand your world terrifies me. Because I lost Catherine, and I won't lose you too. Eleanor stood gathering her things with sharp, efficient movements. But I was wrong to offer him money. That was my fear talking, not my wisdom. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, he tore up the check, threw it in my face and told me to leave. So whatever else he is, he's not after your money. After Eleanor left, Victoria sat alone in the conference room, surrounded by the detritus of negotiation papers, tablets, cold coffee cups. The city sprawled beyond the windows, 40 stories of separation between her and the real world. Her phone buzzing. Watson, the private investigator. You asked me to maintain surveillance on the Reed property. Thought you should know there's been activity. Marcus Reed just sold the garage to a young mechanic named Travis Walsh. $15,000, well below market value. And he's rented a U-Haul. Victoria's chest constricted. Where's he going? Don't know yet, but he's loading boxes. Looks like he's leaving town. She thought about calling Marcus, demanding he stay, offering whatever it took to stop him from disappearing. Then she remembered Eli's face as he tore apart his drawings, Marcus's voice telling her to leave. She had no right to ask them for anything. Keep me informed. She disconnected, sat in the expensive chair that had cost more than Marcus's truck, looked at her hands manicured and soft, and wondered when she'd stopped being able to touch real things without destroying them. The next morning, Victoria stood in her penthouse bathroom holding a bottle of sleeping pills she'd been prescribed after her mother died. She'd taken them for 6 months each night, swallowing oblivion rather than face the empty bed and silent apartment. Now she held them again, weighing the appeal of chemical peace against the knowledge that unconsciousness wouldn't solve anything. She put the pills back in the cabinet, chose consciousness, chose pain. The alternative was becoming the kind of person who ran from consequences, and she'd already done enough running. 200 miles west, Marcus backed the U-Haul against his front porch and started loading his life into cardboard boxes. Eli helped without speaking, carrying armloads of clothes and books with mechanical efficiency. The boy hadn't said more than 10 words since yesterday's confrontation. Mrs. Kowalski appeared on her porch, hands twisted in her apron. "Marcus, what's happening?" He secured a box of tools, not looking at her. "Moving, fresh start." "Because of that woman?" "Because Millfield's got nothing left for us." The neighbor descended her steps, crossed the strip of lawn separating their properties. Her voice dropped low enough that Eli couldn't hear. "Running from your problems doesn't make them smaller. Just makes you more tired when they catch up." Marcus finally met her eyes. "I'm not running. I'm protecting my son." From what, a woman who cared about him, or from the possibility that you might actually be happy again? The observation cut too close. Marcus turned back to the truck. "Thanks for everything, Mrs. Kowalski. We'll send you our new address." Inside the house, he'd already packed Sarah's things, photographs, clothes, the jewelry box she'd kept on the dresser. Everything went into boxes labeled simply S. He'd deal with them later when looking at her handwriting didn't feel like being stabbed. Eli appeared in the bedroom doorway. "Where are we going?" "Pittsburgh. I've got a friend there, Tony. Runs an auto shop. Said I could work for him until we get settled." "I don't want to leave." Marcus closed another box tape, screaming across cardboard. "Sometimes we don't get what we want. Is this because I got mad at Tori Victoria, whoever she is?" The question stopped Marcus mid-reach. He sat on the edge of the bed, gestured for Eli to join him. The boy climbed up, keeping careful distance between them. Marcus chose his words with surgical precision. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. I'm moving us because people here know about Victoria. They'll ask questions, spread gossip. I don't want you dealing with that." Eli's voice emerged small and uncertain. "It feels like running away." "Maybe it is, but sometimes running away is the same as protecting what matters." The boy looked at his father with eyes too old for 8 years. "You ran away after Mom died too. We moved houses, you sold all her stuff, you stopped talking about her. Is that protecting me or protecting you?" The words landed like artillery. Marcus felt his carefully constructed defenses crack. "Eli, I'm not stupid, Dad. I know you're sad. I know you miss Mom. But making everything disappear doesn't bring her back. It just makes it so we can't remember her the right way." Marcus's throat closed. He reached for his son, but Eli pulled back, sliding off the bed. "I'm going to finish packing my room." The boy left. Marcus sat alone on the bed he'd shared with Sarah, surrounded by boxes holding fragments of lives that no longer existed. Mrs. Kowalski was right. He was running. Had been running since the day Sarah died, running from grief and guilt and the terrible fear that he'd never be enough for the son she'd left behind. But running to Pittsburgh wouldn't change that. Wouldn't make Eli less perceptive or Marcus less broken. It would just put them in a new place with the same problems. He almost stopped packing. Almost. But then he thought about Victoria's world colliding with his, about reporters and photographers, and people who'd see Eli as a story instead of a child. Thought about the inevitable moment when Victoria went back to her real life and left them with whatever damage came from her experiment in authenticity. Better to leave now. Cut clean, start over somewhere the past couldn't find them. By evening, the U-Haul was loaded. Marcus walked through the empty house one last time, checking closets and cabinets, making sure they hadn't forgotten anything important. In Eli's room, he found a single drawing pinned to the wall, the family portrait Eli had drawn of himself, Marcus and Victoria under the oak tree. Marcus unpinned it carefully, folded it, put it in his jacket pocket next to the empty space where Sarah's wrench used to live. They left Millfield at dawn, the U-Haul groaning under the weight of everything they owned. In the rearview mirror, Reed's auto repair grew smaller, the flickering R finally disappearing as they turned onto the highway. Eli sat in the passenger seat, sketchbook on his lap, pencil motionless. He hadn't drawn anything since tearing up his pictures of Victoria. Marcus wondered if he'd killed that too, his son's one source of joy in his determination to protect them from pain. Pittsburgh welcomed them with gray skies and colder wind. Tony's auto shop occupied a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. The building listed slightly to the left, graffiti covering the lower walls, barbed wire strung across the roof to discourage copper thieves. Tony himself was 50, built like a fire hydrant, with tattooed forearms and a Brooklyn accent that hadn't faded despite 20 years in Pennsylvania. "Reed, good to see you, man." He pulled Marcus into a rough hug. "And this must be Eli." "Kid, you're taller than your dad," said. Eli managed a weak smile. Tony pretended not to notice the boy's red-rimmed eyes. "Got you set up in the apartment upstairs. It's not much one bedroom, you and the kid'll have to share, but it's clean and the heat works." The apartment was exactly as advertised: small, clean, depressing. Yellowed linoleum in the kitchen, water stains on the ceiling, a radiator that clanked like someone beating pipes with a hammer. Through the single window, they had a view of the alley where homeless men sorted through dumpsters. Eli took one look and retreated to the corner they designated as his sleeping area. Marcus unpacked boxes with numb efficiency, trying to make the space feel like a home instead of a cage. That night, he made mac and cheese from a box, the same brand Mrs. Kowalski always brought, and called Eli to the table. The boy picked at his food, eating maybe 3 bites before pushing the bowl away. "Not hungry. You need to eat." "I said I'm not hungry." Marcus didn't push. He was barely eating himself. His own stomach nodded with the knowledge that he'd made a terrible mistake. But admitting that meant admitting everything that he'd run, that he was scared, that maybe Eli was right about him using protection as an excuse for cowardice. Days blurred. Marcus worked at Tony's shop, trading his autonomy for $18 an hour and the safety of someone else making decisions. The work was identical to what he'd done in millfield brake jobs, oil changes, transmission replacements. But it felt hollow. These weren't his customers. This wasn't his garage. He was just a pair of hands. Eli started school at Lincoln Elementary, a brick building that smelled like industrial cleaner and defeat. The boy came home with forms and permission slips, said nothing about his day, went straight to his corner. No more drawing, no more easy conversation. Just silence broken only by the radiator's percussion. 3 weeks into their new life, Marcus came home to find Eli sitting by the window staring at the alley. The boy didn't turn when the door opened. "You okay?" No response. Marcus set down the takeout he'd picked up, Chinese food, something different, in case variety might spark appetite, and joined Eli by the window. "Talk to me, kiddo." Eli's voice came out flat. "There's nothing to talk about." "School okay?" "Fine." "Making friends?" "Sure." The lies were transparent. Marcus tried a different approach. "I know this is hard. New place, new school, but it'll get better." "Will it?" Eli finally turned, and the look in his eyes was ancient. "Because it feels like we're just hiding, like we'll keep hiding forever." "We're not hiding. We're starting over." "Is there a difference?" Marcus had no answer. They ate dinner in silence, the Chinese food cooling untouched between them. Afterward, Eli went to his corner. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a beer he didn't want and thought about the choices that had brought them here. He'd told himself he was protecting Eli. But maybe protection and imprisonment looked the same when you were 8 years old and missing the only person besides your father who'd made you feel like the world held possibilities. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Marcus Reed." The voice was unfamiliar, female professional. "Who's this?" "My name is Dr. Rachel Foster. I'm a pediatric cardiologist at UPMC Children's Hospital. Your son Eli was brought in this afternoon by ambulance." The world stopped. "What? I just saw him. He collapsed at school. Preliminary exams suggest a congenital heart defect, likely bicuspid aortic valve. We're running tests now, but I wanted to reach you immediately." Marcus was already moving, grabbing his jacket, his keys not caring that his hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the phone. "I'm on my way. Tell him I'm coming." "Mr. Reed, I need to prepare you. Just tell him his dad is coming." The drive to the hospital took 12 minutes that felt like 12 years. Marcus's mind spiraled through every moment he'd missed, every sign he should have noticed: Eli getting tired easily, complaining about his chest hurting when he ran the way he'd been more withdrawn than usual. He chalked it all up to stress, to the move, to heartbreak over Victoria. But it was his heart, actually his heart. And Marcus had been too wrapped up in his own pain to notice his son was dying. The hospital was a maze of corridors and elevators, and people in scrubs who all looked identically exhausted. Someone directed him to pediatric cardiac care on the fourth floor. He ran. Eli was in a bed surrounded by monitors, electrodes stuck to his chest, and IV in his arm. He looked impossibly small against the white sheets. When he saw Marcus, his face crumpled. "Dad." Marcus was there in two strides, pulling his son into a hug that was probably too tight, but couldn't be tight enough. "I've got you. You're okay. I'm here." A doctor entered to Foster, presumably a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and efficient movements. "Mr. Reed, we've completed the echocardiogram. Your son has bicuspid aortic valve with moderate stenosis. It's a congenital condition. He was born with it, but symptoms often don't appear until stress triggers them." "What does that mean?" "It means Eli's aortic valve only has 2 leaflets instead of 3. Blood flow is restricted. His heart is working too hard. If we don't correct it, he'll experience more episodes like today, eventually heart failure." The words hit like physical blows. Marcus's vision tunneled. "Can you fix it?" "Surgery. We'd replace the valve. It's a significant operation, but the success rate is very high. However," she paused, and Marcus knew what was coming before she said it. "Your insurance won't cover the full cost. You'll be responsible for approximately $140,000. The number hung in the air, impossible and crushing. Marcus made $50,000 a year on a good year, had maybe $1,200 in savings. The U-Haul rental had cleaned him out. "I don't have that." Dr. Foster's expression showed practiced sympathy. She delivered this news before watched fathers crumble under the weight of insufficient resources. "We have payment plans, and there are foundations that sometimes help with pediatric cardiac cases. Let me have our financial counselor speak with you." After she left, Marcus sat in the chair beside Eli's bed and did math that didn't work no matter how he calculated it. Even with a payment plan, the monthly cost would be more than his rent, more than he made. He'd have to work 3 jobs just to cover interest. Eli's small hand found his. "Am I gonna die?" Marcus forced steadiness into his voice. "No, we're gonna fix this, whatever it takes." But privately, sitting in the fluorescent hell of a hospital, he couldn't afford. Marcus didn't know if that was true. Didn't know if wanting to save his son would be enough when the world required money he didn't have. His phone was still in his pocket. He pulled it out, scrolled to recent calls, found one he'd deleted 3 times but never managed to erase completely. Victoria's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. Pride and desperation warred in his chest. She'd lied to him. Hurt Eli, destroyed what little peace they'd managed to build. But she also had resources he didn't. Connections that could help. He thought about Eli's drawing, the one in his jacket pocket, 3 people who'd never really been a family, but had looked like one for a few brief weeks. He thought about Sarah, about promises made in hospital rooms, about doing whatever it took to protect their son. Then he thought about Eleanor's offer, $50,000 to stay away. Wondered if Victoria would pay more. Wondered if that made him what Eleanor had always assumed: a man who could be bought, whose dignity had a dollar value after all. His thumb moved. The call connected. Voicemail. Victoria's voice clipped and professional, asking him to leave a message. He almost hung up. Almost. "Victoria, it's Marcus. His voice cracked. "Eli's sick. His heart. We're at UPMC Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. I don't know why I'm calling. We need help. He needs help. If you get this." He couldn't finish. Disconnected. Set the phone on the chair beside him and put his head in his hands. Eli was asleep now, sedated for the tests. Marcus watched his chest rise and fall, counted each breath like currency, like maybe if he counted carefully enough, he could stop any from being the last. The financial counselor arrived with forms and payment schedules and words like financing options and charitable programs that all translated to the same thing: your son's life has a price tag and you can't afford it. Marcus signed where they told him to sign. agreed to debt he'd never escape, made promises he had no idea how to keep. Somewhere in Manhattan, Victoria Ashford sat in her penthouse with her phone on the coffee table, watching it like it might explode. The number on the screen was Marcus's. The voicemail notification had been there for 3 hours. She'd listened to it once, heard the break in his voice, the desperation, the terrible vulnerability of a man who'd rather die than ask for help, but was asking anyway because his son needed it. Eli was sick, heart problems, hospital, help. Victoria had started moving before the message ended, grabbing her keys, heading for the door. Then she'd stopped. Remembered Marcus telling her to leave, to go back to her world and stay there. Remembered Eli tearing up his drawings, his small voice saying she was like everyone else who pretended to care. Going to Pittsburgh now would look like opportunism, like she was using Eli's crisis to force her way back into their lives. Marcus had called, but he might regret it the moment he saw her. Might slam the door in her face and refuse her help on principle. Or he might be desperate enough to accept. And that would be worse, taking advantage of his fear, buying her way into his good graces when he had no choice but to let her. She'd been standing in her foyer for 3 hours, paralyzed by the certainty that any choice she made would be wrong. Her phone buzzes. Watson. Eli Reed was admitted to UPMC Children's Hospital at 3:47 p.m. Pediatric cardiac unit. Diagnosis appears to be bicuspid aortic valve requiring surgical intervention. Cost? Approximately $220,000 total. Marcus Reed's insurance covers about $80,000. He's on the hook for the rest. $140,000. Pocket change for Victoria. A life-destroying sum for Marcus. She could make one call, have the Ashford Foundation cover it anonymously. Marcus would never know she'd been involved. His pride would stay intact. Eli would get the surgery. But that was cowardice. Hiding behind lawyers and shell companies instead of showing up, being present, risking rejection in person. Victoria looked at herself in the foyer mirror, still wearing the suit from today's board meeting, still armored, still protected. She thought about Tory Blake, who'd sat on garage floors and didn't care about getting dirty, who'd laughed with an 8-year-old boy and felt more real than she'd felt in years. The choice crystallized. She grabbed her overnight bag, threw in essentials, and headed for the parking garage. The Bentley was being repaired, still damaged from the accident, so she took the BMW fast enough to reach Pittsburgh in 3 hours if she pushed it. Halfway there, her phone rang. Garrett, where are you going? Pittsburgh. There's a breakfast meeting with the Siemens team tomorrow at 8. You need to be here. Handle it. Victoria. I said handle it. Or don't. I don't care. I'll be back when I'm back. She disconnected before he could argue. Pushed the BMW harder, watching Pennsylvania scroll past in the darkness, trying to outrun the voice in her head that whispered she was making another mistake, that showing up uninvited would only cause more damage. But Eli needed help. And whatever else she'd done wrong, whatever lies she'd told Victoria, knew she could fix this one thing. Money couldn't buy happiness or trust or forgiveness, but it could buy time. It could buy a little boy the surgery that would let him grow up to hate her properly instead of dying before he got the chance. She reached Pittsburgh at 11 p.m. The hospital rose against the skyline-lit windows, making it look like a dying constellation. Victoria parked in visitor parking, grabbed her bag, and walked through automatic doors into the smell of antiseptic and quiet desperation. The fourth-floor nurse's station directed her to room 412. She stood outside for a full minute, gathering courage before pushing open the door. Marcus was asleep in the chair beside Eli's bed, head tilted at an angle that would leave him with a brutal neck ache. Eli slept too, monitors beeping steadily, IV, drip, counting down toward morning. Victoria set her bag down quietly, pulled up a second chair, sat down to wait. When Marcus woke, it would be to find her there. He might tell her to leave, might accept her help with the resentment of a man who had no other choice, might do something she couldn't predict, but she'd be there, present, real. Whatever came next, she wouldn't run from it. Outside the window, Pittsburgh slept. Inside the room, 3 people who barely qualified as family waited for morning and whatever truth it brought. Marcus woke to antiseptic light and the mechanical rhythm of monitors. His neck screamed from the angle he'd slept at, vertebrae fused into positions the human spine was never meant to hold. He straightened with a groan that died when he saw her. Victoria sat in the other chair, 3 feet away, but occupying a different universe. She'd changed from whatever power suit she'd been wearing into jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No armor, no CEO mask, just the woman who'd sat on his garage floor and taught his son about light. She met his eyes without flinching. "I got your message." Marcus's first instinct was anger. She had no right to be here. He'd been desperate when he called the voicemail was a mistake. But exhaustion won. Anger required energy he didn't have. "How long have you been here?" 3 hours. I drove straight from New York." He processed this. It was almost 2 a.m., which meant she'd left around 11, dropped everything to drive 3 hours because his voicemail had sounded like a man breaking apart. "You didn't have to come." Victoria's expression shifted, something between hurt and resignation. "I know, but Eli needs help, and I can provide it. So I came." The calculation was too neat, too clean. Marcus felt the old suspicion rise. "And what do you get out of it?" "Nothing. I don't want anything from you." "Everyone wants something." She absorbed the accusation without deflecting. "Then maybe I want to stop feeling like I destroyed the only real thing I've had in 5 years. But that's my problem, not yours. Eli needs surgery. I have money. The math is simple." Marcus looked at his son, small and fragile among the monitors and tubes. The math was simple and devastating, because accepting Victoria's help meant admitting he couldn't save his own child, that all his pride and self-reliance amounted to nothing when measured against the cost of a pediatric cardiac surgeon. "I can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to." "So what, you just write a check and we're supposed to be grateful, pretend the last month didn't happen?" Victoria's hands clenched in her lap. "I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. I'm trying to keep an 8-year-old boy alive. Everything else, what I did, what you think of me, that's separate." "It's not separate. Nothing's separate when money's involved." "Then what do you want me to do?" "Marcus, leave. Let Eli die because you're too proud to accept help from someone who hurts you." The words hit like ordnance. Marcus's breath caught. She was right, and he hated her for it, hated himself more for needing her, for having a son whose life depended on swallowing every shred of dignity he had left. He turned away, staring at the monitors, tracking Eli's heartbeat. "How would it work?" Victoria's voice gentled. "The Ashford Foundation funds pediatric cardiac cases. I'd make a call, they'd cover the full cost. Completely anonymous. The hospital bills the foundation, you owe nothing." "Anonymous, so I never know it was you." "So your pride stays intact, so Eli gets the surgery, so we both get what matters most." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that hiding behind lawyers and shell corporations was just another form of lying. But Eli's heartbeat on the monitor kept steady time, each beep a reminder that philosophy was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Okay." One word: surrender and salvation, in 2 syllables. Victoria pulled out her phone, stepped into the hallway. Marcus heard her voice through the door, low and authoritative, activating machinery he couldn't comprehend. By the time she returned, it was done. "The foundation will contact the hospital tomorrow. They'll handle everything." Marcus nodded, couldn't look at her, couldn't reconcile the woman who'd lied to him with the woman who'd just saved his son's life. Victoria moved toward the door. "I'll go. I just wanted to make sure." "Stay." The word surprised him as much as it surprised her. Victoria froze halfway to the exit. "Marcus, please, I can't." He struggled for words. "I can't do this alone." She looked at him across the sterile distance of the hospital room, and something in her face crumbled. Not the CEO, not the disguise. Just someone who'd been as lost as he was and didn't know how to find her way back. She returned to her chair. They sat in silence, watching Eli sleep until dawn crept through the windows and turned the world gray. Der Foster arrived at 7 with a team of residents and a tablet showing Eli's test results. She explained the surgery in terms designed to be reassuring: routine procedure, excellent success rate, Eli would be in and out in 6 hours. Marcus heard the percentages she didn't say. 5% mortality rate, 10% chance of complications, 20% likelihood of needing additional surgeries later. When we can schedule for next week, that gives us time to prep, run additional tests, make sure. How soon can you do it? Dr. Foster's expression shifted to something like respect. "If we push 4 days, but that's aggressive." 4 days. After she left, Marcus sat with his head in his hands, trying to hold himself together through pure force of will. Victoria's hand landed on his shoulder, light and uncertain. He's strong, he'll make it through. You don't know that. You're right, I don't. But I know he has a father who'll tear the world apart to protect him. That counts for something. Marcus almost believed her. The next 3 days blurred into a cycle of tests and consultations. Eli woke confused, frightened by the monitors and the IV, and the parade of doctors asking him to take deep breaths and hold still. Marcus stayed within arm's reach, answering questions and signing forms, and trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. Victoria became part of the furniture. She brought coffee that Marcus didn't drink and food he barely touched. She sat with Eli when Marcus needed to shower or make phone calls. She didn't push for conversation, didn't demand forgiveness, just existed in parallel to their crisis with a steadiness that started to feel essential. On the second day, Eleanor Ashford appeared. Marcus recognized her immediately, impossible not to given their previous encounter. She swept into Eli's hospital room like she owned it, designer coat and imperious posture, two security guards trailing at a respectful distance. Victoria stood from her chair, tension radiating. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor's gaze swept the room. The monitors the sleeping child Marcus, standing guard before landing on her granddaughter. "I came to apologize." The words hung in the air, so unexpected they seemed fictional. Victoria's expressions cycled through disbelief, suspicion, and something approaching hope. "To Marcus. To everyone. May I sit?" Marcus gestured to the empty chair. Eleanor settled with the careful precision of someone whose back had been giving her trouble for decades, but who'd never admit weakness. She looked at Eli first, her expression softening in ways Marcus hadn't thought possible. "He looks like you did at that age. Fragile on the outside, steel underneath." Victoria's voice came out careful. "You've never told me that before." "I've never admitted a lot of things. Pride is a family trait, unfortunately." Eleanor turned to Marcus. When she spoke, her voice had lost its cutting edge. "I came to your garage and offered you money to disappear. I thought I was protecting Victoria from making a terrible mistake. The same mistake I forced her mother to make." She paused, gathering something that looked like courage. Catherine, Victoria's mother, fell in love with someone inappropriate when she was 23. A carpenter. Good man, wrong background. I threatened to cut her off completely if she didn't end it. She married Victoria's father instead. Spent 20 years resenting me for it. Victoria's intake of breath was sharp. Mom never said, because she forgave me, eventually, 2 days before the cancer took her speech. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. Her last coherent words were asking me not to make the same mistake with you. Not to destroy your happiness, to preserve some outdated notion of what's appropriate. Tears tracked down Victoria's face. Eleanor reached out, took her granddaughter's hand. "I've been operating from fear. Fear of losing you the way I lost Catherine. But I see now that my interference was doing exactly what I feared, pushing you away." She looked at Marcus. "You tore up my check, told me to leave. That took more strength than accepting it would have. I respected you for it then. I respect you more now, watching you fight for your son." Marcus didn't know what to say. An apology from Eleanor Ashford felt like witnessing a fundamental law of physics being violated. "Victoria's helping because Eli needs it, not because of anything between us. I know, but I also know my granddaughter doesn't make 3-hour drives in the middle of the night for people she doesn't care about. And I know you don't call someone you've cut out of your life unless you still hope they might answer." The observation was too accurate. Marcus felt exposed, his carefully maintained boundaries revealed as tissue paper thin. Eleanor stood preparing to leave. "Whatever happens after Eli's surgery, that's between you and Victoria. But I want you to know, both of you, that you have my support, and my apology for trying to control things I had no right to control." After Eleanor left, Victoria and Marcus sat in stunned silence. Finally, Marcus found his voice. "Did that actually happen?" "I think so, though I might be hallucinating from lack of sleep." They looked at each other and something shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but a crack in the wall, a possibility that maybe the wreckage between them could be rebuilt into something different. The day before surgery, Eli woke fully for the first time in days. The sedatives had been reduced, leaving him alert but frightened. He saw Victoria and his face crumpled. "You're still here." She moved to his bedside, taking his small hand carefully to avoid the IV. "Where else would I be?" I thought, after I tore up my drawings, I thought you'd leave. Victoria's voice thickened. I deserve that. I lied to you. I hurt you. Tearing up drawings was nothing compared to what I did. But you came back. Because I love you, and I'm sorry. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that if you let me. Eli's fingers tightened around hers. Do I still have to call you Victoria? It feels weird. A laugh broke through her tears. You can call me whatever you want. Oh, can I call you Mom? The question detonated in the quiet room. Victoria froze, looking to Marcus for permission, for guidance, for anything that would tell her how to navigate this moment without causing more damage. Marcus's throat worked. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Buddy, that's a big word. You sure? Eli nodded against the pillow. She teaches me stuff. She makes Dad smile. She came back even when I was mean to her. That seems like what moms do. Marcus found Victoria's eyes across the bed, saw his own uncertainty reflected back. They were standing on a precipice, about to commit to something neither of them had planned, for that logic said was too fast, too soon, too complicated. But Eli was looking at them both with hope that had survived abandonment and lies in a heart that was literally failing. If that kind of hope couldn't earn a second chance, what could Marcus's voice emerge barely above a whisper? Then yeah, you can call her that. If she's okay with it. Victoria couldn't speak. She nodded, tears streaming, holding Eli's hand like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to earth. The boy smiled, the first real smile Marcus had seen in weeks, and closed his eyes, drifting back to sleep with a peace he hadn't shown since before they left Millfield. That night, after Eli was deeply under Marcus and Victoria found themselves in the hospital cafeteria at midnight, surrounded by vending machines and exhausted medical staff. They'd bought coffee. Neither of them wanted sitting at a table scarred with years of worried relatives' elbows. Marcus broke the silence. He meant it, about calling you Mom. I know. Are you okay with it? He considered the question honestly. Sarah will always be his mother. Nothing changes that. But he's asking for someone to fill a role that's been empty too long. And he stopped, recalibrated. You're good with him. You see him. That matters. Victoria's fingers traced patterns and spilled sugar on the table. I don't know how to be a mother. I barely know how to be a person outside of boardrooms. Nobody knows how until they do it. You think I knew how to be a single father? I figured it out day by day, mostly by screwing up and hoping I could fix it before the damage was permanent. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Are we doing this, actually doing this? Doing what? Becoming, whatever this is, a family, or trying to. Marcus felt the weight of the question. A week ago, he'd been running from her. Now he was sitting in a hospital cafeteria at midnight, discussing parenting responsibilities and futures that terrified him. I don't know if we can make it work. Your world and mine, forget our worlds. What about us, you and me and Eli? Can we make that work? The directness of it cut through all his defenses. Marcus looked at this woman who'd lied to him, saved his son, driven 3 hours in the night, and somehow managed to be both the worst decision he had ever made and the best thing that had happened since Sarah died. We can try. That's all I've got. We can try. Victoria's smile broke like dawn. Then let's try. They sat in the fluorescent wasteland of the cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee and talking about logistics, where they'd live, how they'd blend their impossibly different lives, what they'd tell people who'd inevitably ask questions. The conversation was practical, grounded, nothing like romance. But somewhere in the discussion of school districts and work schedules, Marcus realized he was planning a future again. Not just surviving day to day, but actually building something new from the wreckage of everything that had come before. Surgery day arrived with the cruel efficiency of all inevitable things. Eli was prepped at 6 a.m., given medications that made him loopy and talkative. He grabbed Marcus's hand with surprising strength. Dad, if I don't wake up, you're waking up. But if I don't, I want you to know, you're the best dad. Even when you're sad, even when you think you're not good enough, you are. Marcus's vision blurred. He pressed his forehead to Eli's. You're waking up. You're going to wake up and be annoying and talk too much and leave your drawings everywhere. That's the deal. Okay, deal. They wheeled Eli away at 7. Marcus and Victoria followed as far as they were allowed, then watched the double doors close, taking Eli into a sterile world where they couldn't protect him. The waiting room was designed for despair chairs that heard after 20 minutes magazines from 2 years ago, a TV playing morning shows at volume too low to hear properly. A dozen other families occupied the space, each wrapped in their own private catastrophe. Marcus paced. Victoria tried to sit but couldn't stay still. They moved around each other like binary stars drawn together by gravity, but afraid of collision. An hour passed, then two. A nurse came out periodically with updates that revealed nothing. Still in surgery, everything's proceeding normally. At hour 3, Marcus hit a wall. The adrenaline that had sustained him crashed, leaving him hollow and shaking. He sat down hard in one of the torture chairs, put his head in his hands. Victoria sat beside him. Her hand found his back, moving in slow circles. "Tell me about Sarah." Marcus's head came up. "What? You've mentioned her but never really talked about her. I want to know who she was." The request was so unexpected, Marcus didn't know how to refuse it. He reached for words, found them easier than expected. She was fierce. Tiny woman, barely 5'4", but she had this presence. When she believed in something, you couldn't shake her. She believed in me when I was 22 and stupid and thought I could make it as a mechanic without any real training. Told me to go to community college, learn it right. I almost didn't listen. But you did. Because she made me want to be better than I was. She had that effect on people. Victoria's hand stilled on his back. She sounds incredible. She was, and when the cancer came, she fought like hell. Chemo, radiation, experimental treatments. We burned through our savings, borrowed from everyone we knew. It wasn't enough. His voice cracked. 2 days before she died, she made me promise something. She said, "Don't let our boy grow up thinking sadness is all there is. Show him that life can still be beautiful." You've kept that promise. Have I? Because it feels like I've spent 3 years teaching him exactly what she didn't want, that loss is permanent, that happiness is temporary, that the safest thing is not to hope. Victoria shifted, turning to face him directly. You've kept him safe. You've worked yourself to exhaustion to provide for him. You've protected his mother's memory. That's not nothing. But it's not what she asked for. Maybe you needed time to figure out how. Maybe... Victoria paused, choosing words carefully. Maybe she sent me not to replace her, but to help you remember what joy looks like. The presumption should have angered him. Instead, Marcus felt something unlock in his chest. He looked at Victoria, really looked, and saw someone as broken and scared as he was, trying to piece together a life from fragments. When my mother died, I threw myself into work. Became CEO at 26 because I couldn't stand being home where everything reminded me of her. Victoria's eyes were distant. I told myself I was honoring her legacy, building the empire she'd started. But really, I was just hiding. Using work the way some people use alcohol. It numbed everything, made me efficient and cold and successful, and completely alone. What changed? You and Eli. You showed me what I was missing. Not the big things like love and family that I thought I'd sacrifice for success, but the small things. The way Eli's face lit up when he figured out how to shade properly. The way you'd check your work twice because getting it right mattered more than getting it fast. She took his hand. You taught me that being human isn't a weakness. It's the only thing that matters. Marcus felt the words settle into him, rewriting assumptions he'd held since Sarah died. That strength meant isolation. That protection meant distance. That the best thing he could do for Eli was to need nothing from anyone. But here was Victoria, who'd driven 3 hours in the night and sat in waiting rooms and offered her heart with full knowledge he might break it. And here was Marcus accepting her presence, her help, her love, because refusing it would mean denying Eli the chance at wholeness. Maybe that was the real strength, letting people in even when it terrified you. The thought was still forming when Dr. Foster emerged through the surgical doors. Her scrubs were clean, which felt like a good sign, but her face was professionally neutral. Marcus stood so fast his vision swam. Is he? The surgery was successful. We replaced the valve, checked all the connections. His heart is responding well. The relief was so intense, Marcus's knees buckled. Victoria caught him, held him upright while Dr. Foster continued. He's in recovery now. We'll monitor him closely for the next 48 hours, but barring complications, he should make a full recovery. Can we see him? In about an hour. He'll be groggy, probably won't remember much. But yes, you can see him, after Dr. Foster left. Marcus and Victoria stood in the waiting room, holding each other up, crying without shame or reservation. Around them, other families watched with a particular understanding of people who knew exactly what this moment meant. Someone brought tissues, someone else brought water. The community of the desperate taking care of their own. When they finally regained composure, Marcus looked at Victoria with eyes that had been scraped raw and refilled with something like hope. Thank you for everything, for being here, for saving him. I didn't save him, the doctors did. You paid for the doctors. You made this possible. Victoria shook her head. Money's easy. Showing up is hard. You've been showing up for Eli every day for 8 years. I just showed up once. Once was enough. They sat together in the waiting room, not talking, not needing to. An hour passed in minutes. When the nurse finally called them back, they walked together to recovery. Eli looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by monitors and tubes. But his chest rose and fell with steady mechanical precision, his new valve clicking faintly with each beat. Marcus took one side of the bed, Victoria the other. They each held one of Eli's hands, forming a chain across his sleeping body. The boy's eyes flickered open. Unfocused at first, then finding each of them in turn. Did it work? Marcus's voice was thick. It worked. You are going to be fine. Most of you are here. Most of us are here, Teak. Eli smiled, the expression dopey from anesthesia, but genuine. That's good. Family should be together. He drifted back to sleep before either of them could respond. Marcus and Victoria looked at each other across his bed, this child who'd somehow become the center of both their lives. He's right. Family should be together. Victoria's eyes glistened. Are we a family? Marcus considered the question. Considered this woman who'd lied to him, left him come back when it mattered most. Considered his son who'd already lost one mother and was brave enough to ask for another. Considered himself a widower who'd spent 3 years running from anything that felt like hope. The words came easier than expected. Yeah, I think we are. Recovery was brutal. Eli spent 2 days in ICU, then transferred to a regular room where pain and boredom competed for dominance. Marcus and Victoria took shifts, one always present, while the other grabbed sleep in the family waiting room. On the third day, Eli was lucid enough to demand his sketch pad. Marcus brought it, watching his son's face light up with the first real joy since the surgery. The boy drew for an hour, his movements careful to avoid pulling the chest tubes. When he finished, he held up the picture, 3 people under an oak tree, holding hands drawn with the careful shading Victoria had taught him. This is us, our family. He'd refined the image from memory, adding details that made each figure distinct and individual. Marcus with his work-roughed hands, Victoria with her careful posture, Eli between them, connected to both. It was beautiful. It was also presumptuous, declaring a reality that hadn't been officially established, that defied every logical objection about timing and compatibility and the vast gulf between their worlds. Marcus looked at Victoria. She looked back. Some wordless communication passed between them. Yeah, buddy, that's our family. 2 weeks later, Eli was discharged. Dr. Foster gave them pages of instructions, medications, limitations, follow-up appointments. Eli listened with half an ear, more interested in the wheelchair ride to the parking lot. They decided to go back to Millfield. Pittsburgh had been running, but Millfield was home. Marcus contacted the mechanic he'd sold the garage to, offered to buy it back. The young man was relieved. He had been overwhelmed, struggling to keep up with the work. They settled into a rhythm that felt like what normal families probably experienced. Marcus ran the garage. Victoria set up a home office, managing Ashford acquisitions remotely, with Garrett handling the day-to-day operations. Eli returned to school, his scar hidden under t-shirts, his energy slowly rebuilding. Mrs. Kowalski cried when they moved back in, bringing casseroles with renewed vigor. 3 months after the surgery, Marcus found himself standing in his bedroom, staring at the ring he'd bought from a pawn shop in Reading. Simple gold band, nothing fancy, nothing Victoria was probably accustomed to, but it was honest, paid for with money he'd earned, representing a promise he intended to keep. That evening he cooked dinner badly but with effort. Eli was in on the plan, practically vibrating with excitement. Victoria arrived home from a video conference to find candles on the kitchen table, and Marcus looking terrified. She stopped in the doorway. What's all this? Marcus's prepared speech evaporated. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the ring, held it up like evidence. I'm not good at romantic gestures. Sarah used to joke that I proposed by asking if she wanted to file joint tax returns. Victoria's hand went to her mouth. Marcus, let me finish before I lose my nerve. He took a breath. I can't give you what you're used to. I'll never have a penthouse or a sports car or the kind of life your grandmother probably wanted for you. But I can give you honesty. I can give you a life where you're valued for who you are, not what you're worth. And I can give you a family, me and Eli, who love you so much, it's actually terrifying. His voice cracked. So Victoria Ashford, will you marry a mechanic who's in debt and has a kid and comes with more baggage than anyone should reasonably accept? Victoria was crying, makeup running, looking nothing like a CEO, and everything like someone who'd found what she'd been searching for. Yes, God, yes. Eli burst from his hiding spot in the hallway, whooping. Marcus slid the ring onto Victoria's finger. It was slightly too large, would need resizing, and kissed at her while his son cheered. Later, after Eli had gone to bed, still buzzing with excitement, Marcus and Victoria sat on the porch of the small house on Maple Street. The night was cool, stars visible despite the streetlights. Victoria leaned against him. Your hands might be rough from work, but they're strong enough to hold on to what matters. Marcus recognized the echo of something he'd thought weeks ago, the idea that his calloused hands weren't clean enough to touch her. She'd transformed it into something better. I'll hold on. I promise. I know, that's why I said yes. They sat in comfortable silence watching Millfield sleep, planning a future that seemed impossible but somehow wasn't. Tomorrow they'd tell Eleanor, who would probably have opinions about wedding venues and guest lists. Tomorrow they'd figure out how to blend Victoria's business obligations with Marcus's garage schedule. Tomorrow would bring 1,000 complications. But tonight they had this two people who'd found each other through disaster and dishonesty, who'd rebuilt trust from wreckage, who'd learned that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose. Inside, Eli slept peacefully, his repaired heart beating steady and strong. On the kitchen table sat his latest drawing, a family of 3 standing together whole. The wedding happened 6 weeks later in the backyard Marcus's grandfather had planted with apple trees 70 years ago. Small ceremony, 40 people. Roy Callahan stood as Marcus's best man. Garrett flew in from New York to stand with Victoria. Eli was ring bearer, taking the job with such seriousness he practiced his walk for days. Eleanor sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief and not caring who saw. Mrs. Kowalski wept openly. Even Tony from Pittsburgh showed up, bringing half his shop crew. The officiant was a retired judge who'd fixed his Cadillac with Marcus in appreciated brevity. He kept it simple. When it came time for vows, Marcus spoke first, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. I promise to see you, really see you every day. Not the CEO, not the disguise, but the woman who sits on garage floors and teaches my son about light. I promise to let you in even when it's scary, and I promise to love you with the same fierceness you've shown loving us. Victoria's turn. Her voice was clear, carrying across the small gathering. I promise to show up, in the good days and the impossible ones. I promise to choose this family over everything else every single time. And I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that sometimes the best things we find are the ones we weren't looking for. They exchanged rings, his still from the pawn shop, hers, a simple band that matched both of them, chosen for meaning rather than cost. When the judge pronounced them married, Eli cheered so loudly 3 dogs in neighboring yards started barking. The reception was held in Reed's Auto Repair. The garage bays decorated with lights and flowers, music playing from the same radio that had been there for decades. Someone had rented tables and chairs, but most people stood eating Mrs. Kowalski's cooking and drinking beer from coolers. Marcus danced with Victoria to a country song. Neither of them knew the words to Moving Without Grace, but with perfect synchronization. Then he danced with Eli, lifting his son, despite doctor's orders to take it easy, both of them laughing. When Victoria danced with Eli, the boy whispered something that made her cry. Later, she told Marcus what he'd said. Thanks for coming back. Most people don't. As the evening wore down and guests started leaving, Eleanor approached Marcus. She'd had enough champagne to soften her edges, but not enough to slur. Take care of her. She's stronger than she looks, but she breaks in ways that don't show. I know. I'll be careful. And let her take care of you. She needs to be needed. Don't let your pride get in the way of that. Marcus nodded, understanding the hard-won wisdom behind the advice. Eleanor patted his arm, almost affectionate, then headed for her car and the long drive back to New York. At midnight, the last guest departed. Marcus, Victoria, and Eli stood in the garage, surrounded by decorations and dirty plates, exhausted and happy. Eli yawned. Best wedding ever. Victoria laughed. How many weddings have you been to? Just this one, but it's still the best. They walked home together, the three of them, through streets Marcus had known his whole life, but which now felt different, transformed, like he was seeing Millfield for the first time. Inside the house, Eli went straight to bed. Marcus and Victoria stood in the kitchen, still in their wedding clothes, processing the enormity of what they'd just done. We actually got married. Victoria's smile was incandescent. We actually did. Think we can make this work? I think we already are. She was right. They'd been making it work for months, the awkward blending of schedules, the compromises about where to live and how to parent and who cooked dinner. The hard parts were already happening. The wedding was just making it official. Marcus pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you too, both of you, my family. They stood together in the small kitchen, listening to the house settle, to Eli's soft breathing from the next room, to the quiet certainty that they'd found something worth keeping. 6 months later, on a morning bright with spring, Marcus opened Reed's Auto Repair to find Victoria's BMW in the lot. She emerged wearing jeans and one of his old work shirts, carrying coffee for both of them. Thought I'd help today. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You sure last time you spent an hour looking for the lug wrench? That's why I need practice. They worked side by side through the morning, falling into the easy rhythm they'd built over months. Around 10, Eli arrived from school half-day for conferences and settled into his corner with his sketch pad. Roy Callahan stopped by to pick up his truck, saw Victoria covered in grease, and grinned. Mrs. Reed, looking professional. Victoria laughed. I'm getting there. After Callahan left, Marcus pulled Victoria aside. I've been thinking about expanding, hiring young mechanics, training them properly. Like an apprenticeship program. Yeah, teaching kids who can't afford tech school. Victoria's expression softened. I'm in. You didn't even look at the numbers. I don't need to. You're good at what you do. You care about doing it right. That's enough for me. Marcus felt something unclench in his chest. This was partnership. Building a life where both of them contributed what they were good at, where money was simply a tool for making things better. Thank you. They sealed it with a kiss broken only when Eli yelled from the garage. Guy's customer. Eli appeared moments later holding up his latest drawing. It showed the garage morning light streaming through the bay doors, Marcus and Victoria working side by side. Underneath, in careful letters, family business. Marcus studied the drawing, feeling the weight of everything it represented. A year ago, he'd been alone, running from hope. Now he had a wife who understood him, a son whose heart beat strong, a business that mattered. He looked at Victoria, who was smiling at the drawing with an expression that mirrored his own gratitude. You know what the best part is? She raised an eyebrow. This is just the beginning. Victoria pulled him close. Then let's live it. Together. All three of us. Outside, Millfield carried on. Inside Reed's Auto Repair, a family built from wreckage and honesty went back to work, knowing tomorrow would bring challenges, but facing them together. And in the corner, Eli drew, capturing light and shadow, preserving moments that would someday seem impossible. The time his father learned to trust again, the time a CEO remembered how to be human, the time a broken family became whole.